All right, it's Lack of Lepers. We're going to do part 2. Wasn't planning on doing another video today, but I'm just so excited about this. And the first video was like 10 minutes. So let's pick it up right where we left off. Dr. Gears.
Oh! I've never heard of that in my life.
What the No, I'm not old. Fuck off.
Okay, so we're like,
no,
hold on.
No,
We're
listen up.
6 minutes and 40 seconds into it, and Dr. Gears just told this guy to fuck off. Love that. And I don't think it was like a totally flippant thing. I think he's kind of being serious. Because the kid doesn't know what pantyhose are. I mean, granted, I don't think women these days do that. I mean, it's kind of like an old woman thing. So, and in that way, Dr. Gears is kind of aging himself. And it's weird that he said he's not old. But whatever. This is a mess. This is a trash fire.
You're a decade older than I am.
Oh my God.
A decade.
It's not
You're
that.
prehistoric.
It's not that different. Nylons are a thing. At least I didn't say like stockings or some shit. I don't know.
I would have known what you meant.
Man,
Oh my God.
this is fucked up.
It's like when my grandpa used to say Davenport. I'm like, what the
This is
fuck are
fucked
you
up,
talking
man.
I was
about?
just messing
Jesus.
with it right before this.
Mr.
Like, I
Cohen.
had it in my hands.
Come on.
Where'd you put it?
This is insane.
You can't cut any of this out. You have to leave samples of this.
I
this
might
is-
take it and
you-
put it at the end because it is kind of funny.
You gotta leave something.
Dr. Gears has
I'm
that
just hearing
wheeze
you, like-
laugh, you know.
Because of the positional audio, I'm just hearing you whiff around in a void.
Like that cartoon dog. Don't know
Just
who
like
it is.
running around in this void, like at differing angles of audibility. Randomly
bad
heckling.
podcaster.
Can't wait to edit this later. This is gold. I'm definitely leaving this in some way.
Great laugh. Gotta love it.
God.
Oh my God.
Sheesh, let's get
Did
to
you
the interview.
put it in a drawer? Did you put it on top
Can
of the
I fast
refrigerator
forward
when you
through
went to
this?
go?
Let's just do 1.25.
You know, turn it off.
We all know what these people sound like.
I might have put it in the drawer.
Check it out. Check where you did the
What is he looking
blanket
for?
or whatever. This is like
Pantyhose?
my youngest son, is probably the absolute worst at finding things. Like in a long shot, it will be touching him, and he won't be able to find stuff.
This is my entire life, Dr.
He's-
Trust me.
He's the worst thing is he is marginally worse than my eldest daughter. The other two do all right. Those two could lose something
four
in the
kids.
offhand.
Jeez, man. I'm a dad of
my
2.
God.
Oh my
and
God,
that's
this is insane.
enough.
I should have found it by now.
Wow.
Let me make sure I didn't like go behind my desk.
Yeah,
Good on
law of
him.
averages said you should have accidentally
I kind
found
of
it by
want
now.
to skip this shit. He's still looking around.
I absolutely understand. Pop filters
We're gonna
are.
record this, I'm not gonna make the auto quality work.
Oh, it's
Yeah,
a
no.
pea popper he's looking for. That's right.
Just entertain the,
He's still looking for. I'm
Children
fast
will
forwarding,
leave
by
us
the
whenever.
way.
On this podcast. Our host is descending into madness. So let's you and I talk for a moment. How you doing?
Sure.
How are
Great.
things going?
Very well.
I hope.
Yes. How are you?
Right now, where I'm at is a balmy 12 degrees, give or take.
Where are you?
Has been sleeting for several hours, so really
that
it's
sucks.
like spring.
God, a
around
cold day
here.
is
I was
like
moved by you.
it's like
As
50 degrees here. This is a
our
cold
host
day.
struggles. Just so you know, if you're not in the know, if you're not in the process, the pop filter
Yeah.
prevents strong sounds, particularly when you say like pop, like sort of that popping sound that
I don't
comes
have
with
one.
the
B
voice.
sound, the
This-
B sound, the
This works pretty
plosives.
well.
There it is, plosive sounds.
Plosive,
Which if you're
great
with
word.
stuttering, you probably
And
know
the
very well.
sibilance as
And the
well.
pop filter is a
High
small,
on the EQ
typically fabric
range.
screen that sits in front of a microphone. You've probably
Sibilance.
seen them on your favorite high-profile YouTuber's face cam. It's that little disc that sits in front of the microphone. Helps block that stuff. It's about a...
I'm going to
funky
skip
guess.
this.
But in either case, without it... yeah,
Magnus Archives.
there's
It sound like it's on a tape recorder.
a certain process that does lend itself to that aspect. But if it's not what you're shooting for, it's just annoying shit. So...
Okay, well this is actually a windscreen. I've realized after you gave your
Ultimately,
yeah, it's better.
fun fact, if you're completely jammed up, I have seen people like do stuff like hang a shirt, semi-permeable, piece cloth or some shit like that.
Indeed, we have.
There
Well,
it
here we
is.
are, 12 minutes in.
Yeah, thank God. Here we go.
12
How about
minutes.
we?
At the end of the podcast, 12 minutes of madness.
Jeez, and it's 2 hours and
I
40
think I
minutes.
probably will move most of this to the end. Just have like
How much
it'll
of
probably just
this
fade
is-
out somewhere
is
and then
like
fade back
this?
into me having found it.
Just scrambling around like
turn it down just a little bit.
Stroke. It's great.
That's a brilliant way to describe
Very
it.
happy that you're listening to that. I'm very excited about this. Don't know if you
Okay,
can tell.
well, Anyways, the fun little story that caused us to be here today, huh?
LOL, quote unquote, fun little story.
Oh yeah, this was real fun for
That's
both
like
of
when
us.
you're getting ready to end your shift somewhere and your supervisor comes up. It's like, funny thing, funny story.
Exactly. Oh god. So this weekend, right? Not this weekend. It is this weekend. A few days ago.
Yeah.
I go to my computer. Yesterday. This was yesterday. Yesterday, I go to my computer. I'm like, I'm gonna edit Dr. Gear's episode because this is gonna be episode 15. I need to be ready to release it on Wednesday because we do weekly uploads now on Wednesdays. By the way, 5 p.m. I will be in chat live most of the time if I can. Come to them. It's cool. It'll actually be probably more like 6 p.m. Anyways. Yeah, so I go to Dr. Gear's file. I'm looking for it. I find his file, his side of the interview, his audio. I got it. It's perfect. I go to find mine. Nowhere. I cannot find it anywhere. I searched for like an hour, panicking most of the time. Honestly, was not a fun morning. Only to realize I didn't save it at all.
Somehow.
wow.
Somehow.
So-
Apparently, I'm 15 episodes in, and just now I
There it
make
is.
this mistake for the first time. And I can guarantee it'll be the last, or I
This is
swear
the
to
second
God.
interview
You're
that
going to
they've
try
done.
your absolute best. I know how this stuff
Oh,
works.
man.
And then I got the message like, so, a thing happened. I'm gonna try to fix it. But
Dr.
no, it's
Gears
not
has a
fixing it.
YouTube channel.
Can we?
Yeah.
Like, could you do something? I mean, I can work
No,
it out if I
content
have to.
here.
You're just like, no, it's fine.
Profile picture is a bunch of gears.
I was really happy you said
He hasn't
yes.
done anything.
That was
He's
a
got
rough morning.
172
That was a
subscribers.
Real, real fucking rough.
That is one of
That's
those.
pretty good.
It's one of those things. Just kind of waking up, just kind of sitting there, looking at your life, going, you know what? Mom said this would happen if I kept being an asshole, and here I am. Damn it.
Mom said I would lose my audio recordings if I kept being an asshole.
Yeah, no,
Okay, I
she
think I'm gonna have to go
pathetic.
faster on this because there's too much dead space here.
But so here we are. So things are a little janky.
Yeah.
Or better or worse, I guess, depending on a lot of situations. But there it is. So.
Boy.
I think it'll actually be a lot better, honestly. If
Yeah.
anything, you guys, the listeners, are benefiting from this.
No, you legitimately are, because last time I was a mini segment, and I believe I'm a full-fledged segment. I think.
Yeah,
And,
yeah. I mean, last time you started as a mini segment.
Yeah, we just kind of kept bullshitting. It was like, let's just keep going. And then
God.
Yeah,
Let's go,
exactly.
guys.
now we have
Now we're going in full interview. Like
Full
I have a
interview.
bunch
Let's
of questions
go.
written out and everything. That's a better way to say it,
Well,
especially considering.
either anyway. For both sides.
Okay, I wonder if he's okay. Before we get into the actual questions, because I think we're getting close. I mean, my God, it's like pulling teeth, getting to it. But I wonder if how much out there, bet wise, does someone want to throw up for him asking Dr. Gears where he gets his creative ideas from, and or to explain what the SCP Wiki is.
Yeah,
Alright,
sorry,
so-
Gears. No, none of the immense amount of money I make from these goes to the guests.
There it is. There it is. All, just literally, parking meters full of proceeds.
Yeah.
Dimes aplenty.
exactly.
So I tell people,
All of my little change.
A
bag,
nickel,
little
if you
$1
smelt it
I get
down
on
right
Patreon
now,
every month.
There
is
you go.
worth 10
There you go.
cents.
Every
By
single
the
day.
way, you
That's
should support the
funny.
series because I need editors. Anyways.
Thanks.
There it is.
It's
There it is.
inflation.
Okay, well, how about we actually begin?
Yeah, I mean, what the hell? May as well.
Well, thank
Okay,
God.
start-
I could have
yeah,
skipped to the
kind of like
17-minute
a set of
mark.
questions, 3 sets of questions: the past, the present, and the future,
Ah.
and then everything else that doesn't fit into this weird timeline that I made for some reason, for no other purpose than to guide myself through the interview.
There we go.
So. Let's start off. We might have a few people listening in today who don't know what the SCP Wiki is.
Oh,
Saying
God,
that
there
is
it
you,
is.
I recommend you check out DJ Cactus's episode, or maybe Randomini's episode, because we go into more depth, especially in
Could
DJ
have made a
Cactus's
lot
episode
of
about it.
money.
But I will ask you, Dr. Gears,
lot of
briefly,
nickels.
what is the SCP Wiki, just for
Oh,
those who
God.
might not know?
For you may not know, going from a straight up cut and dried aspect, the SCP Wiki is a massive
I mean, the problem is, if you're a fan of this podcast, you've heard this question and answer, this 101 statement, like 3 times now.
writing collective. It is a sort of a massive shared universe project, the idea being that there are items and places and people and events that are outside the norm, sometimes horrifically so, sometimes just different.
But
And within
Dr.
this, there are
Gears,
various
Dr.
organizations
Gears,
trying to
Dr.
interact with
Gears
various
does it
ways.
so well, doesn't he?
And one of the big ones being the foundation, the monolithic central entity. And all these different things are based around various
What intelligence?
manuals, in a way. That's what the main list entries are, various containment projects and reports on these various items. In addition, there is a massive wealth of in and out of universe writing projects, essays, stories, just about anything you can make, including various other forms of media. It is a relatively unique thing in that it's a massive writing collective that no one really intended to have happen. It kind of very organically
Mhm.
grew.
It's a beautiful thing about
So
the
if you don't
SCP
know,
Wiki.
go check it out. You'll probably find something interesting, at the very, very least.
Oh, for sure.
at least it
Personally,
started
an
out
article I really like
beautiful.
is 6443.
Okay.
You left the code alone and forgotten. It's a pretty good one. I enjoy that one a lot, greatly. In fact, I know
Oh.
it really well. I've actually
Really?
just read it so many times.
Oh, I
yeah,
see.
it's real good.
I
It's like the best
see.
on the Wiki actually.
I see. My goodness. Well, you should check it out then. Absolutely check it out. I don't sense any detection of bias whatsoever.
No, certainly not. Certainly not. I'm very objective. I'm very objective.
See, if it's not my bias, I don't care. It's fine. If it's not my stuff, I don't detect anything at all, so it's fine. And how old is that entry? If I remember right, that's relatively fresh off the presses.
The 6443.
Correct.
I'll actually talk about that real briefly. Here's another thing that changed since, obviously, we're not talking about me here, but I will say this briefly. Another thing that changed since the
So
first
this is
recording we
this
did of
guy's
is that
own
I'm now
SCP.
an author on the SCP Wiki because I posted my first one, and it's at 32 upvotes, so it's probably not going to get deleted off unless there's a very large amount of people who really decide to dislike it all at once.
There you go.
What a waste of time.
Can't tell by
Thank
clapping.
Sorry.
Maybe you can tell. I don't know.
What a waste of time.
Sort of an Animal
I can
Crossing
imagine,
villager
I can
clap, just-
You're talking to Dr. Gears. Don't talk about your
No,
first.
That's great.
I went through the
Never
crit
mind.
process, got crit from 4 great authors, and that's what took me there.
That's
Actually,
awesome.
Rendum and I, who I had on the podcast, helped me come up with the idea originally.
There you go. I was not one of them, so nobody look at me. This is all this man's.
He doesn't want to be associated with that
Don't blame
shit.
Dr. Gears for what this
Unless it's
eventually gets
good, in which case I spiritually assisted in some way or another. Then don't worry about it. No.
Wait a second.
Wait.
Looking through these upvote ratings here, it seems that a certain Dr. Gears upvoted this, and yet he says if it's good.
Slander. I don't know.
Dr. Gears, are you saying you didn't read the article before upvoting it?
I was hacked. It's not even.
You were hacked? You were hacked.
I'm sure it was hacked.
Dr. Gears is
Well,
upvoting
Discord
people
message
now?
from you saying you
That's
upvoted
good
it,
news.
and it's interesting.
Let's actually
at
go
least.
just because this is quite boring
It
and
is
see
interesting.
if
I love
it's
it. It is
true.
interesting. It is not my.
I believe him.
kind
I'm
of
not
shit that
saying
I
it's
would write.
outlandish. I mean,
That doesn't mean anything. It's
more than
actually
willing
kind
to
of-
believe that
I
Dr.
sort of
Gears
looked at it initially,
uploaded.
it's like,
Just want to see
cool.
it.
And then I kind of got a little bit more
Ha
into it.
ha
It's
ha.
actually pretty interesting. It's whenever you start goofing with like memetics and like memory, thought,
He did upvote it.
impulse
Very
stuff, things
good.
get
Good for
weird.
him.
And I dig it. It's interesting.
Well, I'm happy that you like it at least to some extent.
Yeah.
I know it's definitely not your type of thing. Honestly, I'm actually not a big fan of horror.
Get
At
out.
all. I joined the
Get
wiki
out.
for literally everything else.
Yo, get out. Get out. It's over. There it is. No. It's
Yeah, Dr. Gears, that's
Alright,
not
20 minute
that's not
interview,
going to
half
work.
of it is just me fumbling around my room.
1 minute interview. Half you fumbling
I
around.
mean,
one way.
if you had that attitude
Wow.
towards
Tight to it. No.
if you had that attitude towards the average SCP author, there won't be any left. So calm down.
No, that's fine. That's fine. It's
I mean, I'm with you, but hey.
Yeah.
This isn't what we're here for, though. This is what we're here for. I'll do an episode of my other podcast, SCP Authors Anonymous, that centers around me talking about my article at some point.
There you
Because I
go.
do want to talk about it. I
Awful
have things to say.
idea.
absolutely.
Sorry, terrible idea.
Oh
But,
no, there you go.
Nope.
I might actually have to cut that out because I don't know if I want people to know about that yet.
Oh, no.
Maybe I'll just beep out like the
Just beep out the
part of
date.
it and leave in me saying I'm going to.
No. You don't beep it out. Listen up. Play the game right. It's redacted.
Oh, smooth,
Oh,
smooth.
oh my
If you're
God,
gonna-
you're a genius.
If you're gonna
He
do
is
it's
very
redacted.
good.
Oh wow. All
That's
right,
how
I'm
we
writing
do it
that down.
here.
That's an editor's note right there. Okay. Dr. Gears.
What's up?
All right, let's just start right from the beginning.
Yeah.
Take me through your journey with the SCP Wiki. How did you first get into it?
I got into it way back at the start. It was shortly after the X Paranormal Board had gotten minted on 4chan. Yeah, 4chan. Way back there. And initially, it was like, now if you go there, there's a lot
So
of
if he
paranormal-
wasn't Dr. Gears, he would be canceled already, just because that's how they operate there. You are defined by whatever group you have some sort of history with. Period.
stuff. But initially, when X first got made, it was just a clearinghouse for all the creepy threads that were on other boards. It was a place to kind of put them all in one spot. And there really wasn't any intention for it to be like actually paranormal, at least not initially. And you had a lot of stuff. You had Dinah House, you had John Dies at the end, you had Ted the Caver, you had all this, a lot of stuff you look back now, it's kind of a little bit hokey. But it was very big deal. And that was some of the stuff floating around. And two of the big series, like the ones that had multiple entries, or at least a couple of them,
holders.
were 173, the statue, and the SCP stuff in kind of this vacuum, and then the holders. And I'll touch on both of them in a second. But the first, there were a lot more of the holders, if I remember right.
Yeah.
When we first got started, there was several entries.
Tons.
And the holders were like basically there was an artifact or an item,
Over
or basically
500.
some kind of horrible ritual to bring a set number of items together to some effect. It was an interesting idea.
Shout out to the Config Wiki. Check out the article on the holders. Amazing stuff.
But ultimately, where it kind of didn't catch on the way the SCP Foundation did, it was all being done by one person, who kind of lost the script a little bit, kind of going midway through. Whereas the SCP Foundation, or the SCP items, or the SCP item at the time, were just this very weird thing. And it was the image that hooked me. I remember seeing the statue. I had clicked on it.
The image that has been removed for no good reason at all.
It's like, oh, I'd seen it a couple times. It's like, man, that's funky looking. And I clicked on it. It was like this funky, like rotten fetus looking thing. I just closed it back up and was like, no, I'm good. I'm not doing that again. And like, it creeped me out. It really creeped me out. I ended up reading it, kind of looking over it. It's like, wow, that's actually really fairly interesting. That's actually really cool.
He said that the holders kind of lost the script. I don't know how you couldn't make the same case, argument-wise, for the SCP by now.
And I saw some other stuff kind of floating around. A couple of items, which I cannot remember some of the initial stuff. I think some of them didn't even end up like being part of the main wiki. I think there was like a couple items that never made it off the forum. So there's something in some lost media for you somewhere there. Somewhere, some janky, worthless SCP items floating around.
If you want to scour through Fortran,
Scour through the archives.
Yeah, that's actually what we do, by the way, as on the config wiki. It's not just me. Other people do it and just kind of see what was there at the time. Really interesting stuff.
Jesus, that is an undertaking. No,
Yes, it is.
I looked at this and I wanted to write stuff for a long time, since I was a kid. And I was looking at the stuff and going, you know what, this is actually really cool. So
Dr. Gears is the most successful author, period. No matter how you slice it, unless you want to look at fake metrics like upvotes. In fact, Dr. Gears has made the most money, I think, of any author, because if you technically count his fundraiser, that was like over $30,000 that he raised. And that happened at the right time. But essentially, he got that much money for doing what he did at SCP. So that's pretty cool.
Got some ideas together, and I think it was 82, the machine. That was my first one that actually did good. I think it was the first one. It was.
Yeah, it was. It's the first one on your file.
It was the first one on my file. I'm trying to remember I believe that was the first one I ever wrote, beyond horsing around with stuff, actually trying to write an article. And I put that together, and then I remember initially I was vaguely aware that there was a wiki, the old wiki, which I felt funny for some reason. I felt like I shouldn't post stuff there. I'm just some rando, as opposed to every other rando posting stuff. And I'm like, well, so people be like, wow, this is really cool. I said, well, if you think it's cool, put it on the wiki. I wouldn't do it myself. I'd have someone else do it. I want that kind of layer of validation or something. I don't know.
I mean, I feel like that's a thing that a lot of people experience with art. I talked about this
It's just so strange that even since the beginning, posting stuff to the main SCP main list was somewhat, foreboding. It's interesting, even for someone like Dr. Gears.
really mediocre, but there's I feel like I'm not alone in feeling. Sometimes it just feels like you can't make something as good as what other people are making because you're you and they're them.
Yeah, it's you kind of look at this thing and there's a sort of monolithic thing. It's like I'm not blank, and
exactly.
What you have to kind of realize is that that person probably wasn't that, even if they got started initially. And there's nothing to say that you can't. So a moment of encouragement for whatever.
When I was at SCP Wiki, I compared myself quite heavily to other people too much, and it became a very unhealthy thing. It's just I think it's part of it's personal. I always compare myself to other people like that. I'm highly competitive, and I get bothered when I don't do as well as other people have done. But there is a culture on SCP that holds certain people up as sort of benchmarks of success, what you want to call success, and that is emphasized very heavily. The sort of cultural hive mind machine is turned up to just an absolute maximum in that sense at SCP.
Give it a shot. You never know. But with that, I started putting stuff on the old wiki back in the day, and actually started putting stuff out. And
he's talking about
I've heard this come up before, and it's something I want to address just for a second while we're right here because there's a reason. A lot of the series ones, especially the early series ones items, I've seen people dunk on them because they're short, and it's like you have to remember a couple things. First of all, they were meant to be short; they were meant to be concise. Second of all, some of these had to be posted under the post limit on 4chan, which was not big. You had a very, very small amount of characters to get.
It's like Twitter.
A creepypasta horror story in. And if your post went on, first of all, if you didn't have a picture, and your post went on for more than maybe 2 posts, nobody would read it. Nobody would read it. And then it wouldn't get anything. So you had to try and pare it down. And then when we moved to Wiki, things bloomed up a little bit more. But especially with the older stuff, you have to remember, that was the constraint. It was you have to get in under the single post limit and have a decent picture in order to get any kind of traction. And that was, it was exciting in kind of a weird way, kind of, sort of writing under the gun sort of way. But
sure.
It definitely is better now. But that's part of the reason why a lot of the early ones are really short.
Yeah.
I think honestly.
Well, obviously there were some technical barriers and limitations going on at that time, but I would think that there's a little more to it. I don't think that the SCP phenomena would have gotten as big if they started out, very, very long. I think that sort of bite-sized limitation at the onset really did a lot to give it the traction that it eventually had, and the capability that it now has to be, novella length.
If I open an SCP and it's short, I'm way more likely to read the whole thing.
See, and that's because of the nature of things. It's if you go in that thing and you start scrolling down, it's like, oh, this thing has 8 logs, dude. I gotta make dinner, man. I can't be. I can't.
Exactly.
Whereas if
This is something that writers, especially at SCP, don't take seriously enough. As my camera shakes, if you're gonna make something really, really long, that's fine. Okay. It better be really good. It better be really, really good to merit, 7,000, 10,000 words. Like he said, several addenda collapsed, Otherwise, you are asking the reader to indulge your fantasy of yourself as a writer more than you should as a writer. Does that make sense? Really, really good stuff can be good when it's long. Most stuff is bad and long. So if you're going to be real bad, just at least make it short. You should be trying your hardest to make it as short as possible. And that way, as you add to it, it's absolutely necessary. Your threshold for extending the piece is so high that by the time you do it, it's really, really warranted and probably a lot better than if you just willy-nilly just wanted to write a long thing.
It's just like a paragraph, too. It's like, I won't do anything with it anyway. So I guess maybe, what is it? They say brevity is the soul of wit. So
See?
Exactly.
Fuck. That, but, what a smart guy.
So that's kind of how I got initially
totally lost on the current SCP.
Started was I was a rando on a forum, and I said, "Hey, I can do this," and started writing stuff. And it did well.
Yep.
It was
like most people had that experience.
I wasn't an author before this at all.
It's a good experience.
I wasn't like anybody. I was working, and for a lot of the initial stuff, I was working tech support for a chemical plant. If that tells you anything, I was, nobody with this. It's just like, this looks cool. I guess I'll play, and just start posting stuff.
I think that's how it is with most people on the SCP Wiki, even nowadays, honestly.
And I think it's better in a way. But especially when you come into like a big community, there's kind of this perception like the people that have done stuff like are somehow more qualified. It's not even just a wiki; it's like anything, really. It's when you come into any kind of like pre-existing structure, there's kind of this impression that like the people that have been there longer or have done big stuff are like somehow intrinsically different. And I'm sure that does happen, but generally it's just, some weird guy just doing stuff. And there it is. So that was my initial.
It's not like this is a job. You don't need your resume to.
Yeah, and that's a great point. I mean, such a good point, because when you come into it, obviously, you're learning. I talked about this in a previous episode where, like, I came across people's names and was like, this person is a big guy? Like, what a weird name. But, excuse me. But, yeah, so that's very important. It's so hard to explain. But basically, these people shit just like you do. And they're very human, and they have the same insecurities that you have as a brand new author on the SCP Wiki. They're just as sensitive about downvotes or a critical comment or something like that as you are. And the secret is that a lot of them, and a lot of those who have a lot of clout, are probably more sensitive than you are as a new author for things like this. But yeah, no, that's such a good point. This is why I like to hear Dr. Gears talk, is because he really does a great job of deconstructing the sort of clique culture and culture of cult that is just so profoundly evident at SCP. I mean, it just reeks of it. It's like I said, partially, I mean, it can't fully be an objective thing. Part of it has to be a person thing. But it's so interesting. It's so interesting and odd, really, that the SCP does such a good job consistently and reliably of coming off as this sort of elitist thing. And so Dr. Gear's words here are just excellent things for anyone to listen to, not just people who've just started on the wiki. That's it for now. We'll pick it up again next time. Thanks for joining.